Hello everyone, Press Ups 19. Just let me put the fat app on my phone. Oh, look at that. Oh, I look so fat. I'm bald. Amazing these apps, aren't they? Anyway, Press Ups 19. Characters. Characters we take on, personas we take on. You know, in the 90s we had all these cool films about, you know, drugs barons and all these kind of cool dudes. And then in the 90s we got gangster rap and we got all these personas. And when you watch films like Straight Outta Compton, you understand why people had to be tough to fight back with things that were atrocious things that were going on. Oh, there's the epic. Atrocious things that were going on in their lives. Because they had to stand up for something. But unfortunately, us being impressed by the way people are, you know, we take on that gangster image, and a lot of people taking on this gangster image, and there's a lot of people taking on other ways of being. And there was a brilliant, when I was a kid, there was a brilliant cartoon called Mr. Ben. And Mr. Ben every single day, every single like Friday, would go into this fancy dress shop, and he would one week he would be an Indian, and the next week he would be a cowboy, and the next week he'd be like a knight, and he would take on these characters and these personas, and he would have an adventure. So he would go into this shop, he would go into the changing room, and he would pass through this door and have his adventure, and he would come back. And as we've grown up, because of TV and stuff. Before radio, you sat and listened to the radio, but with TV, it gives you images. And look at Jennifer Aniston. She straightened her hair for an episode of Friends, and GHD made £1 billion because we look at things and go, wow, that's amazing. It'll make me look different. People will love me more, and people will think I'm amazing. That's like Mr. Ben. You get to go into these rooms and become something because you don't believe that you're good enough. You know, Mr. Ben, it's proper mad it was. You used to love it. It was on just after the Sullivans. And you'd always just sit there and what's his adventure? Who's he going to be today? And it's dead strange because it was that like period of time, the 60s and 70s and 80s, where people started to take on other people's. Look at when Madonna came out, every person, every girl I know had a booth on, and like, you know, Suddenly Seeking Susan, whatever it was called. We took on these things. Look at all the Depeche Mode fans and the Flock of Seagulls fans with mad haircuts. Look at the Sex Pistols. Everyone started to dress like, because that was the rebellious thing to do. It would have been really interesting if punk brought ballet suits and people wore ballet, and you see how easily an impression people are. It's this scary thing. You don't believe you're big enough to be something, so you wear somebody else's face. You know, that's going back to the Mr. Ben thing, putting on a costume. The problem is you can't live that life forever. And speaking for me, being a squaddy, it was great being a squaddy because you just get to be a squaddy all the time. And then you're out and you're lost because you can't be a squaddy anymore. And I've been lucky to have been a firefighter for 2 years. And you get to be this brand. Oh, what do you do? And it's the second question. Hi, what's your name is the first question. Second name you always ask is, what do you do? And then what we do is, when we ask what we do, we position ourselves against a person. So in the military, you would chat to someone and say, oh, what are you? Oh, I'm a private, I'm a corporal, I'm a sergeant, I'm a sergeant major, I'm an officer. And you would automatically find a place to be. And the bizarrest of things, you would talk to somebody who was no different than you, but because of their Mr. Ben uniform, you automatically gave them too much. You just gave them too much. You became submissive. And as our friendships with people, we're so obsessed with how big our house is and how where we live and what our jobs are. We just talk, and this is great. What's been good about lockdown is you've got to come back to be in your house and think, you know, who am I? What am I? Yeah, it's just don't lose track of who you are. Don't get upset because you can't run into battle anymore. Don't get upset because you can't do something that you did before. You know, Mr. Ben is another good example because every week he got to be a different thing. He got to be all these different things. It's like, oh, what's he going to be this week? Whereas we seem to just find the comfort in being something, and when we can't be it, it upsets us. Find yourself, you know, just go back to when before it all, before the changes went on. You was a little kid. And really, I class myself so lucky that I'm dead lucky that I get to work with young people and I get to work with people who are on the turn, and you just get to see the simpleness of being a human being. This wonderful, untouched magicalness of being a little person. And we're so busy trying to be Mr. Ben, and we're so busy putting on our uniforms that we forget. We're so embarrassed. We're so scared of dancing and so scared of. When you work with young people and you see them running around playground, they love it, and yet how many people over 12 will run? Not a chance. They won't, because they're scared of looking silly. Think of that episode of Friends where Phoebe goes jogging and runs through, and she's waving her arms everywhere. It's just that. What's the word I'm looking for? It's the magical thing of the untouched soul of a young child. It's just, we've got too many masks on. We've got too many things we need to be. If you can't mention what you do for a job in your greetings with people, measure yourself on that. All right? And go back to being you. Because at any stage as a kid, did you ever think, I'm going to hurt myself and don't want to be here anymore? I know children that go through that because they're in trauma. But the rest of us, we just picked up on other people's garbage. Obviously, I picked on being, looked at a lot of fat people and bald people and thought, you know what? I'm going to be fat and bald. Maybe I need to be skinny and get some hair again.